Alrighty guys, moving on again. Alright, we're on Genesis chapter 40. Alright, we finished on verse 13 last time, so we're going to start on verse 14. Alright, without further ado, grab your Bibles. I'm on the NIV version. You can follow along. If you don't have a Bible, all good, I'll read out the verses anyway. Alright, let's start with a quick prayer. Alright. Father, I pray as we read your word that you sanctify us by your truth. Your word is truth. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Genesis chapter 40. Right, remember it's the cupbearer and the baker. They're in prison with Joseph. Quick summary. Alright. Verse 14, chapter 40. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in the dungeon. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. This is what it means, Joseph said. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in this interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Alright, so Joseph asked the restored cupbearer to remember him before Pharaoh. Alright, 3 days later, 3 days later, exactly as Joseph interpreted the dreams, right, the cupbearer is restored and the baker is executed. Alright, but the cupbearer forgets Joseph. Right, for 2 full years. Alright, so Joseph is innocent. He was betrayed by brothers, he was falsely accused, he was unjustly put in prison. Right, now he helps someone get out of prison. It says, just remember me, and he's forgotten. Right, 2 years. Right, that silence is heavy. Right, what we're seeing right now is probably Joseph's hardest test. Right, it wasn't persecution, right, not temptation, but the delay, right? And delay, what it does, it exposes whether we, trust timing or we demand control over the situation, right? Joseph asked for help, right? And that, it's not wrong but God did not allow the deliverance yet, right? And why? Because it just wasn't the time, right? The cupbearer may have forgot Joseph, right? But God hasn't forgot Joseph. Right, and sometimes heaven, and God withhold moments, right, because the positioning isn't complete yet. Right, Joseph thinks that he needs freedom, right, but God knows he needs the Pharaoh. Alright, we're in chapter 41 now, verse 1. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Right, so 2 years later, Pharaoh dreams. Right, 7 healthy cows were devoured by 7 gaunt cows. Right, 7 healthy heads of grain, right, devoured by 7 thin ones. Right, he's disturbed. Right, none of Egypt's magicians can interpret the dreams. Right, and the timing is exact, right, at the end of 2 full years, right, not 1 day early, right, it wasn't 1 day late, right, God initiates the next move. Right? Pharaoh dreams of cows scared in Egypt. Right? He dreams of grain, right, which is Egypt's economic strength. Right? And both are devoured. Right? This dream isn't just a random dream that Pharaoh had. Right? It attacks Egypt's, symbols of stability. Right? And notice how no one can interpret it. Right? Why? Because revelation only belongs to God. Right? Human intelligence cannot, decode divine messages, right, without the divine mind and the divine light of God. God is shaking a king, right? Shaking a Pharaoh to elevate a prisoner in Joseph. Right? That's what's happening here. Verse 9. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream, and things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh." Right? So the cupbearer now suddenly remembers Joseph, right? Pharaoh then summons Joseph, right? He's shaved, changed, and he's brought before the king. Right? The butler says, "Remember, I remember my faults this day." Right? So conviction, right? It wakes up memory. Right? Joseph waited 2 years, and in one morning everything changes. So he shaves, he changed clothes, right? He stands before the most powerful ruler in the region, right? And I guess here's the principle, right? When God moves, he moves quickly, right? There was years of delay, Joseph was waiting, and now minutes of promotion, right? Joseph doesn't know it yet, but this is the turning point. This will be the turning point of his life, right? Prison was preparing Joseph, right? It was preparation, right? Now comes, presentation, right? Joseph's going to present himself. Verse 15. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Right? Pharaoh tells Joseph he heard he can interpret dreams. Right? Joseph replies, "It is not me. Right? It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Right? That's showing, maturity. Right? 17-year-old Joseph spoke of his dreams. Right? Now Joseph speaks of God's authority. Right? He doesn't, remember, he's been waiting for 2 years, and he does not capitalize on the opportunity. Right? He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't promote himself. Right? He redirects glory immediately to God. Right? He could have leveraged his position. Right? Instead, he chose to honor God. Right? So power without humility, right, just becomes, corrupt. Right? Testing without humility, refines. Because Joseph is ready now because pride has been purged. Right, verse 17. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first, but even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me." Right, so Pharaoh explains the cows and grain again, right, emphasizing how disturbing and unnatural it was. Right, so the repetition, right, him repeating this dream emphasizes the severity. Right, the healthy are swallowed by the unhealthy, yet the unhealthy remain unchanged. Right, this isn't not normal, imagery, right? This is like a total economic collapse, right? Pharaoh senses a divine disturbance, right? And notice how he admits that no one could interpret it, right? This is a king, right? And he confesses limitation, right? So God often reduces, the need for self-sufficiency, right? Before revealing the sovereignty that he has. Verse 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon." Right, so Joseph declares the dreams are one message from God, right? He says 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe famine, right? The repetition means the matter is firmly established by God, right? Notice how boldly Joseph is speaking here, right? He doesn't say, "Oh, I think it means this," or "I think it means that." He says God has shown, right? Showing, prophetic clarity, right? He even says God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do, right? Pharaoh is powerful, right? But he's not ultimate, right? And what God's doing here is he's not advising, right? He's declaring, right? There's going to be 7 good years, and there's going to be 7 devastating years, right? And notice how the famine will erase memory of abundance, right? When hardship is, severe, prosperity almost feels like a myth, like it can't happen, right? The repetition of the dream means like certainty, right? When God repeats a certain message, it means urgency, right? That's what it signals. Verse 33. "And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They shouldn't collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food." Right, so Joseph advises Pharaoh to appoint a wise administrator, right, and store 1/5 of the harvest during the abundant years to prepare for the famine. Right, Joseph does more than just, interpret. He starts to strategize, right, which is quite amazing because he doesn't stop at just revelation, right? He offers administration, right? Notice how he doesn't volunteer himself, right? He simply says, "Let Pharaoh select a wise man," right? Joseph is no longer chasing a position. He is serving faithfully in whatever place he stands, right? It's almost preparation in prosperity, right? God's warning comes with, a bit of wisdom, right? And the same Joseph who managed Potiphar's house and managed a prison is now outlining, how to manage a nation, right? So every prior, season, right, his time in jail trained him for this moment. All right, we're going to end it there on verse 35 in chapter 41. All right, thank you guys if you've watched and listened along this far. I appreciate it a lot. May God bless you, protect you, keep you safe. All right, pray you have a good rest of your day, week, weekend, whatever it is. All right, see you in the next video.